The courtroom was tense, filled with the buzz of reporters, the shuffle of papers, and the constant clicking of cameras capturing every detail of the woman at the center of it all. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake sat quietly, her wrists bound in cold steel handcuffs. To the world outside, she was a paradox, a hero who had earned a reputation as one of the Navy's most skilled snipers, and yet here she was, sitting accused like a criminal. The first female SEAL sniper in history, now reduced to whispers and speculation. The prosecutor's voice carried across the chamber, but most people weren't listening to him. Their focus was on her, on the hardened warrior who once stood tall in combat zones, now seated with her head slightly bowed. The charge was clear, disobeying a direct order during a mission overseas. But beneath the surface of legal jargon and military protocol, another story simmered. The mission she was being judged for had gone viral on news outlets. Rumors spread that she had refused a command that could have taken countless innocent lives, choosing instead to defy her orders and save civilians caught in the crossfire. To her superiors, it was insubordination. To the families she saved, it was mercy. And yet, in this sterile room of law and judgment, mercy didn't seem to carry much weight. Sarah remained silent, her face calm but her eyes heavy, as if replaying the choice that had brought her here. A choice between following orders and following her conscience. The courtroom listened intently as the prosecutor painted Sarah as reckless, a soldier who had abandoned discipline for sentiment. He spoke of protocols, of chains of command, of how the Navy depended on obedience for survival. His words were sharp, accusing her of jeopardizing not only the mission but the lives of her own team. Every sentence seemed to press her deeper into the role of the accused. Yet Sarah didn't flinch. She sat still, her gaze lowered, her silence speaking louder than any defense she could have offered. Inside her mind, though, the memories played relentlessly. She could still see the children, terrified, barefoot, clutching each other in the ruins of a village that had become collateral in someone else's war. The order had been simple: authorize the strike. It would have been quick, efficient, and in the eyes of command, clean. But she had seen their faces, their cries piercing through the chaos. In that moment, she had made her choice. She shouldered her rifle, not to fire, but to cover her team as she ran into danger, pulling the smallest bodies into her arms and shielding them from the violence meant to erase them. Now, in the safety of this courtroom, her heroism had been twisted into recklessness. To the prosecutor, she had broken trust. To Sarah, she had only honored the one trust that mattered, the responsibility to protect the innocent. And as she sat in silence, the weight of that choice pressed harder than any accusation ever could. The courtroom air was already heavy with tension when the double doors at the back suddenly swung open. The sound was sharp, echoing off the walls, and every head turned in unison. A man in full dress uniform entered, his presence commanding immediate silence. It was Admiral Thomas Kane, a figure whose reputation carried almost mythical weight within the Navy. Decorated in more ways than most could count, he was known not only for his victories but for his uncompromising integrity. His unexpected arrival froze the room in an instant. Even the judge paused mid-sentence, his gavel lowered but forgotten. Guards instinctively stiffened, attorneys adjusted their posture, and reporters clutched their pens tighter, sensing the moment was bigger than the trial itself. Sarah lifted her head for the first time since the proceedings began, her eyes locking on him. For a fleeting moment, she was no longer the accused officer in handcuffs but the young recruit who once stood under his command, shaped by his example of leadership. Admiral Kane walked down the aisle with measured steps, his polished shoes striking the floor with a weight that seemed to punctuate the silence. He did not look at the crowd, nor at the prosecutor who fumbled with his notes, but directly at Sarah. His expression was unreadable, stern, yet tinged with something softer, something only she seemed to recognize. When he stopped at the front, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the words that everyone knew could change everything. When Admiral Kane finally spoke, his voice carried a quiet authority that silenced even the rustle of papers. He requested to address the court, and though protocol was rigid, no one dared deny him. He turned first toward the judges, his gaze steady, his words deliberate. "You've heard her called reckless," he began, gesturing toward Sarah, "but I call her courageous. I gave her every reason to follow the order as written, and she chose instead to follow something higher, her humanity." The room seemed to lean closer as he continued, recounting the mission in vivid detail. He spoke of the target, a compound marked for destruction, and of the children Sarah had seen within its walls. To fire would have been easy, he said, his voice heavy with conviction. To hold back, to run into danger and shield the innocent with her own body, that was the harder choice. That was the choice of a leader. Sarah's chest tightened as his words echoed what she had never dared to speak for herself. Her eyes burned, but she kept them fixed on him, unwilling to let them fall. For the first time, the narrative in the courtroom shifted. It was no longer about defiance versus obedience, but about morality versus blind duty. By the time the Admiral finished, the silence was absolute. The prosecutor's case seemed suddenly small, brittle. What lingered instead was the weight of his truth, that real strength is not just in following orders, but in protecting life at all costs. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp against the silence, and his voice carried a new gravity. He looked at Sarah, then at the Admiral, and finally at the court. After a pause that felt endless, he spoke, "Remove her restraints." The clinking of handcuffs echoed like a release of breath the entire room had been holding. Sarah flexed her wrists slowly, the marks of the steel still imprinted on her skin, but for the first time since the trial began, she felt the weight lifting. Around her, the mood shifted. Reporters who had come to capture scandal now lowered their pens, some visibly shaken by what they had heard. The families in the gallery watched her with quiet awe, their eyes no longer filled with suspicion but with gratitude. A few even stood, starting an unexpected ripple of respect across the courtroom. The Admiral stepped forward, his gaze steady, and raised his hand in salute. The act stunned everyone present, an admiral saluting an officer on trial. Sarah's throat tightened as she rose to return it, her eyes glistening with tears she could no longer hold back. The moment transcended rank, rules, and protocol. It was not about punishment or absolution anymore, it was about honor. When the judge finally declared her not guilty, the decision felt less like a verdict and more like recognition. Sarah left the courtroom not as the accused, but as a reminder that true heroism lies not in the trigger pulled, but in the life spared.